this shrinking world. But that's not the topic. The topic is self-denial and self-manifestation. Now, there's an apparent contradiction here in the title. How can we have self-development, self-manifestation, when the self is denied, restrained, ignored, or rejected? Self-denial and self-manifestation actually refer to two selves. Self-denial refers to the apparent self, and self-manifestation refers to the higher self. Now, are there two selves or one self? Actually, there's just one self with many, many disguises. The one sun appears different at different times. At dawn and sunset, the sun appears larger and less bright than it does during the day. The same sun appears brighter or dimmer in the day according to cloud cover and atmospheric conditions. Last summer in St. Louis, the residue of a Saharan sandstorm passed overhead in the high atmosphere. And for a couple of days, we had just incredibly brilliant sunsets. But it's the same sun, 93 million miles away, appearing in different terrestrial conditions. But the disguise of the apparent self with respect to the higher self is a different type of disguise. Normally, when a person puts on a mask, or when a person takes a part in a play, or adopts the role of a spy, he or she knows who they are, and they attempt to fool other people. The apparent self is a different kind of disguise altogether. We deceive ourselves first, and then others. The whole problem is that we don't know the higher self. And the primary disguise of the apparent self is the body-mind complex that we put on at conception and wear until death. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita calls it a garment that we put on and wear and then cast away at death. On the day that Swami Vivekananda died in Calcutta, July 4th, 1902, he appeared to Swami Ramakrishnananda in South India saying, "Sashi, I cast off the body." Actually, it was more graphic. "Sashi, I spat out the body." Whoa. What is ordinarily, for the ordinary person, the be-all and end-all, is an unnecessary byproduct, like spittle, that you spit out of the body. I don't need this anymore. For the world teachers like Sri Krishna and Swami Vivekananda, it's plain as day. When they say I, if they say I, they are not referring to this body-mind complex. What it is that they are referring to is not so clear to the rest of us. For most of us, it's plain as day that we are the ever-changing body-mind complex. How do we deceive ourselves with our primary disguise? We are not actually the body or the mind or the aggregate of the body and mind. We are actually the knower of the body, the knower of the mind, and the knower of the external world. And we are distinct from all that is known. The unchanging observer, the knower, is changeless. Changes signify a frame of reference which is at rest, unchanging. Change is measured against something that is not changing. That unchanging observer is the real person. But we don't experience the unchanging observer, the knower, as it is. The knower is always mixed up with the process of knowledge. The knower, the process of knowledge, and the objects of knowledge are experienced as a dynamic process. We can infer the existence of an unchanging observer from relative experience. What is it that maintains our identity through all the changes that the body and mind go through? Birth, growth, decay, and death. Why do we feel that we're the same entity, the same person that we were when we were little boys or little girls, and now we're older, perhaps very old? Why is it that we feel we're the same person when rationally we're not? We're changing all the time. What is it that connects the dots of all these changes, that gives us that continuity, that awareness that we're the same person? We can infer there's something there, but we don't actually experience it. The ordinary person, and by ordinary person, I mean men and women who are not illumined, doesn't separate the knower from the process of knowledge. And for the regular person, the objects of knowledge are much more real than the knower. And since the body and mind are with us from cradle to grave in the waking state, the body-mind complex becomes the most real thing. It is our primary disguise. To recap, the apparent self of self-denial is the apparent self of self-denial that must be restrained, controlled, and the higher self, the knower, that is to be manifested. Now, the unchanging observer is linked to the body and mind through a mode of mind called egoism. Through egoism finds expression in the body and mind. The I of egoism is identified with the body and its conditions. I am young or old, tall or short, handsome or ugly, healthy or ill, strong or weak. The I of egoism is identified with the mind. I'm happy or unhappy. I'm calm or angry. I know or do not know. And the ego, being identified with the changes of the body and mind, is like trying to catch a shooting star. Because of those changes, the ego is always in flux on the macro level and on the micro level. And the closer we look, the more things are changing. On the micro level, on the atomic level, things are just going furiously. And this ego, our identification with the ego and all those changes wears us out. And the only change that we ordinarily get, the only rest that we ordinarily get from the yoke of the ego is in deep sleep, when we throw it off and rest in our own nature, though unconsciously. We rest in the knower, but there's a veil of ignorance, and we don't come out of deep sleep as illumined souls. We come out of deep sleep the same person that fell asleep the night before, but hopefully with a good rest. And it is the deep sleep part of sleep which gives us that rest when we throw off the ego. Now, the mind in general is intermediary between our body and that unchanging observer. When the mind turns upward to the unchanging observer, the real self, we get more knowledge and joy and more and deeper understanding. And when the mind turns to the body, we get more selfishness. Selfishness and sense attachment get hold of this. And it is by restraining these desires that are born of our identity with the changing conditions of the body and mind that we make progress as human beings, secular and spiritual. By way of example, we can't even have physical health without self-restraint. As the French say, we dig our graves with our teeth. In the short term, if we overeat at a meal, we may be uncomfortable, or we may get sick. It can affect our digestion and our ability to assimilate that meal. Too much of a good thing. And we can only taste it in the palate, the front of the mouth to the back of the mouth. After that, it's gone. And there are long-term consequences to health as well if we don't practice self-restraint with respect to eating and so forth. So many things influence our health. Some years ago, one of our close devotees in the South passed away. And I went down to Louisiana to do the funeral service. Now, for the day or two that I was there, I ate with his family, two of his daughters. He had other children. I breakfast, lunch, and supper. And I really was enjoying that visit. It was old-fashioned Southern cooking. I mean, we had cornbread at every meal, fresh-baked cornbread at every meal. Put it in a cast iron skillet, put it in the oven, turn over the skillet just as you're about to serve the meal, slather it with butter, and the best cornbread I have tasted, and fresh at every meal. And the rest of the food was like that too. So after a while, I mentioned it. And Lauren said, well, she said, you know, she said, we just like our grandparents did. This cornbread, for instance, when we mix up the batter, we put in some really, I don't remember the measurement, some huge amount of butter. And then when it's still hot before it's served, we slather on more butter. And it's the same with the rest of the cooking. And you might think that's strange because my sister Jan and I are both registered nurses. And we know very well that statistically, it cuts 5 years off your life. But we'll die happy. You see, the reality that's important there, and this is very clearly expressed, you know, that's what I like about Harold's family. They're all very straightforward. They're just easy to be with. It's very clearly expressed. The reality is there through the sense of taste, and they're willing to sacrifice for that. And they're doing it knowingly, not ignorantly, but they're making that decision. Well, that's the position of a lot of people. Now, on the one hand, I'll give you two alternatives. Years ago, when Swami Chaitananda was in Southern California, he went with a devotee to see his mother in the nursing home. And she expressed a desire, well, food is always a problem in those establishments. She wanted some potato salad. She really wanted potato salad, and her son wasn't moving to get it. And Swami says, no, go right now, find some potato salad somewhere and bring it to her. She says, these desires that people have as they're approaching death are very important and they should be fulfilled. Okay. So on the other hand, you've got Keshav Chandra Sen. When he got sick and was very near death, Ramakrishna had to go to see him, and Keshav could barely make it out of his private quarters to the living room to talk with the master. And the people there were surprised because there was no mention of Keshav's physical condition. The entire conversation was about God, you see? And the choices that we make now will determine where our mind is as we approach death, as we get closer to death. Do we want to be like the lady who wanted potato salad, or do we want to be like Keshav Sen, who only wanted to talk about God? Every little movement we make contributes to how that's going to be at the end. Now, this is a little diversion on happiness. And I want to tell another incident. We have a wonderful devotee couple here in St. Louis, and I'm not, all our centers have wonderful devotee couples. This couple came in the mid-50s to Vedanta and really made it their life. Ray died in 2007, but Wanda's still with us. And until just recently, she cooked twice a week, took care of the library, did all these things. And you could just set your clock by her. Her habits are so regulated, you know, when she would come, when she was cooking, how she would arrange things for the pujas. When she took a job, you didn't have to think about it. She'd take care of it. You could tell from their lives that they have gained something from their participation in their spiritual practice and their service. You can tell, and they're inspiring examples for other people. But Wanda in particular never takes the position that she knows anything about spiritual life. She'll say, well, I don't know. You have a conversation with these things. She won't talk about it, but you know she knows something. So she was up here in the office one time doing something related to the library work, and I don't know why, but just out of the blue, I asked her, Wanda, what's the secret of happiness? And there's a pause. And then she says, the secret of happiness is to have a goal in life. And the highest goal is God realization. End of conversation. She went on to what she was doing next. The higher the goal, the better. And the highest goal is God realization. So we need to look up. We need to look up at the higher self, because that's where we get the highest happiness. But looking up only comes after long experience. The goal can be secular or spiritual. Having a goal integrates the ego and puts relative priorities on the various facets of life. If you want to be a professional athlete, so many aspects related to health have to be regulated, starting with the type, quality, and regularity of food intake. And there's a mental aspect as well to athletic training. Even in the best physical condition, if you can't keep your mind calm and focused, you won't be able to perform at your optimum. If our goal is spiritual, we need a healthy body to sustain the spiritual discipline. The health of the body and mind is a means to the ultimate goal of realizing God. Food has to be evaluated not just for nutrition and quantity, but for its effect on the mind. Certain foods agitate the mind while others calm it. The whole process of food intake, and we learn this through experience. If we turn our lives more or less into a regulated experiment, and we have this kind of regularity of meals and food, we can tell, because there aren't a lot of things that are changing, what one particular food does to the mind or another. You see, through a process of watching carefully and regulating things, we can find out which foods have which effects on the mind. The whole process of food intake can be reverse engineered from our ultimate goal, whatever that is. And the health of the body-mind is not just important for spiritual aspirants in terms of gaining the ultimate goal. It's important along the way, because as along the way, we get different kinds of experiences, and it's important to have a big receptacle. So we're not like the farm pond that the elephant goes wading in Ramakrishna's little aphorism and get all out of kilter when the experiences actually start to come to us. In any case, keeping our bodies healthy requires self-restraint, self-control, and is necessary in order to meet our higher goal, whether that goal is secular or spiritual. Now, where is our superiority as human beings? It's in the power to discriminate between right and wrong. Moral life doesn't exist at the subhuman level. In human life, we have reasoning power, and it is the great privilege of human life to exercise this. It's also work. It wears us out. Sometimes we like a vacation from it. Essentially, we're pure, free, perfect. But that higher reality gets mixed up with the psychophysical constitution. We're not born pure and free, as Rousseau and Voltaire and some of the philosophers of the Enlightenment thought. They thought the natural man that we're born with needs to be expressed rather than restrained. And that thought of the Enlightenment is still very much with us in the common culture. So on the one hand, you've got the Atman, which is pure, free, immortal, and the same in everyone. And on the other hand, you've got the body-mind complex, which is quite different from person to person. And there are many factors that are not desirable, that are hidden in the subsoil of the mind. Past some scars are there, good and bad. So this body and mind need to be regulated in order to manifest the higher self. They need to be controlled even for physical development and health. But for every aspect of life, we need to restrain and control the vehicle. And part of the way religion does this is by various vows and exercises that strengthen the will: fasting, pilgrimage, ritual, and so forth. And by building up the willpower, we're able to make faster progress. Truly speaking, there can't be any real progress in life unless human beings have the capacity to restrain and sublimate the basic biological urges and needs that we share with the lower animals. The basic energy, prana, Swami Bhajanananda calls it universal life, the basic energy becomes transformed through restraint and sublimation into physical, intellectual, aesthetic, moral, and spiritual pursuits that distinguish us as human beings and separate us from the lower animals. It's all in what we do or do not do with the raw material, the raw energy that we get just by being alive. By practice of self-control, we become established in the moral path. And from the moral level, we can reach the transcendental level. And until we reach the transcendental level, we can't rest. We aren't safe. The bad samskaras, whether from this life or previous lives, can be attenuated. They can be overpowered but they're still there and potential and have the potential to act until those samskaras are burned by the fire of the knowledge and direct realization of reality. So we can rest on the landing, but we're not safe. That's why they talk about a razor's edge. Sri Ramakrishna's, he has these one-line parables that are so deep. He says, the expert dancer never takes a wrong step. What's going on here? Every thought, every movement. Well, first of all, the expert dancer is the realized soul. Okay. And what's the dance? What's the dance of the realized soul, such that he doesn't, it's always rhythmic? The dance is dharma. Because the realized soul has reached the source of dharma, he doesn't have to consult the rule book to know how to act morally. It comes naturally at that point. He doesn't need an external, we need an external light when it's dark, but not in the light of day. That light of day is the realization of God. And from that perspective, the realized soul is always in rhythm, no matter what. And in the case of the avatar, because they are that reality, special manifestation in human form, their lives become the guideposts for how to behave and how to live, and not just in their lifetimes, but for hundreds and thousands of years. So it's from them and from the realized soul that we get the moral disciplines and the examples of how to live in this world. So how does a person rise through a gradual course of training? How do we get from where we are to the realization? What are the steps? Vivekananda says, take a person from where they stand and from there give them a lift. And it's essential that we have enough insight to know where we stand. And that's one aspect of life that the spiritual teacher can be very helpful with. And also our interpersonal relationships, our close interpersonal relationships give us a very good idea of where we stand and where our limitations are and what we need to work on. And that's where we need to start walking from. So if a person is used to wrong action, like hurting others, then the course of action for him is to try to stop injuring others. There are vindictive people. You scratch me and I'll take your finger off. If you can't be unselfish, at least for your selfish ends, don't hurt others. Start with this. This is an act of kindness for this kind of person, not to react and overreact and really hurt people. And this is necessary for our own good. We can't have peace of mind if we achieve our goal in an unfair way. By hurting others, we can't have peace of mind. Now, years ago, I worked with juvenile delinquent teenagers. And we had some really severe cases. And the meanest kid we had, my observation was that he really wasn't very much bothered by his conscience at all. And after I'd been there a while, I realized, well, maybe he is, because I heard that he couldn't sleep at night. He had nightmares that woke him up. So he could push this down during the daytime, but at night, his conscience came up and he couldn't sleep. gradually, by following these courses, a person will be able to help others. At this point, he's not hurting others. And with that as a foundation, he can gradually develop the ability to do good to others, but still without much self-sacrifice. The middle stage, so that there's a progression. And during this progression, the lower self gradually expands towards the higher self. The middle stage is trying to help others without sacrificing one's own interest very much. For the sake of his own interest, he does good to others. This is a political move. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's a targeted donation. What will I get from this? Called enlightened self-interest. So enlightened self-interest is really just a refined form of self-interest. It could also be called, it's not unselfishness in the true sense. It's really enlightened selfishness. Now, gradually, the person develops the insight to know that virtue is a value in itself. How? Because virtue, selflessness, expands us. By virtue, I mean cultivating fellow feeling towards our fellow beings, love in its various manifestations, and overcoming anti-feeling or negative feelings, anger, jealousy, hatred, pride. This is how the transcendental loving consciousness manifests on the human plane. This is dharma. And with this expansion, we have more strength, more knowledge, more freedom. This insight gradually comes through experience. And in this process, external resources don't help us much. They don't help us as much as internal resources do. Through this process, we gradually become rich in internal resources. We stand on a rock. We can gradually get to the point where we maintain our balance in spite of very difficult adverse circumstances that are external to us. Now, how does it work? There's a gradual progression through self-denial to selflessness and an awareness of the higher self that we get through the process of purification that comes through living in that manner. We gradually become aware that we're not confined within our own bodies and minds, but we also dwell in others. As the Upanishad says, all beings in himself and himself in all beings. And with this realization that comes in flashes and glimpses from time to time as we grow, the sense of otherness goes. Fear comes from this sense of otherness. When that sense of otherness is gone, when the one self expands and enfolds all, there is love and love alone. From this self-expansion, from this self-manifestation, there is real manifestation of power, real manifestation of joy, real manifestation of freedom, real manifestation of knowledge. The more we confine ourselves within the shell of the ego, the more our power is restricted, our joy is restricted, our freedom restricted. It is by sacrificing this ego and all that is concerned with this ego that a person attains real self-development, self-manifestation through self-denial. Religion particularly holds to this principle. Do not hold to this ego. It is false, it is apparent, it is changing. But hold to your real self and know your kinship with the Supreme Being. Sacrifice this self, this ego, to the Supreme Being. Self-surrender is the motto of all theistic religions. Surrender yourself completely to the Lord. We aren't the masters even of ourselves. Whatever joy, power, knowledge we have is all from that one source, the transcendental source. For the time being, we exercise some power or hold some knowledge and consider it a great thing, but it is only relative and temporary. Even great intellects, great philosophers like Immanuel Kant, it's only temporary. In old age, he suffered from dementia, as did another great philosopher from India, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. These talents, these abilities that we develop with great effort and identify ourselves with, come from another source. They're only with us for a time. Truly speaking, there's only one master in the universe, only one source of all these things. The more we cut off our individual lives from that one source, the more restricted we are in every respect. And the more we link ourselves with that source, which is not far from us, which underlies all forms of existence and cannot be apart from anything, the more we expand. Which way are we looking? Up to the higher self or the other way, through the body and the senses at the external world? We see the outer form of things, but not the unchanging, the underlying reality. That underlying reality is subtle, the perfection of existence, ever shining, conscious of its own nature. And that underlying reality is manifest within us as this conscious self, this unchanging observer. Because of this conscious self, the Atman, we live. Because of it, we have the power of action. Because of this conscious self, we have the power of knowledge. Human beings experience joy and freedom and knowledge and love because of that conscious self that dwells within us. And that conscious self, which is innermost in us, is innermost in the universe. That innermost reality pervades everything in the same way, but its manifestation varies. Within living creatures, we see a little manifestation of consciousness. In human beings, a little more manifestation of consciousness. And that little expansion of consciousness is responsible for all of humanity's greatness. That consciousness in human beings has taken the form of definite self-awareness. I know I exist. I am a conscious being, fundamental. No argument is necessary and no proof can negate that innate self-awareness. And that innate self-awareness is a partial expression of the consciousness, all-pervading reality in human beings. And that's what makes humans dominant among all living beings. The fact that that conscious principle is more manifest within us than other living beings. Our philosophical knowledge, ethical idealism, spiritual illumination, scientific and technological achievements are all due to the partial expression of the infinite underlying loving consciousness in our self-awareness on the human level. This conscious expression finds greater manifestation the more we recognize it. That is, the more we recognize and become aware of that underlying conscious reality. Self-denial doesn't mean wanton subjugation of the body-mind complex. It doesn't mean starving ourselves or torturing ourselves. It means subordinating the body and mind to the real self that underlines and sustains them. And it takes two forms. We've been focusing on the conscious principle, but that is a principle of loving consciousness. And we can approach it through the path of knowledge or the path of love. And for most of us, the practical course where we get traction is the path of bhakti, the path of divine love, approaching the personal God, the repository of benign qualities, who creates, sustains, and disintegrates this universe through loving relationship. There are two basic paths. I am that reality, and I am his or hers, the path of knowledge and the path of bhakti. And even though, for most of us, we're not thinking I am the Atman all the time, but practicing devotion towards our Ishta, it's important to understand the path of knowledge, to have an intellectual comprehension of it. Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna taught a syncretic approach to spiritual life. The paths of jnana, bhakti, karma, and raja should be harmonized. If we have all those arrows in our quiver, we can manage much better and approach the goal of spiritual realization much more effectively. As Swami Vivekananda said, when I feel good, I am that reality. And when I have a stomach ache, it's oh ma, ma, ma. Shankara has a lovely little aphorism that kind of sums up what we've been talking about. Now, I'm using the term self-control, self-restraint, self-denial synonymously. Shankara says, self-control means the direction of the body and the faculties of the mind for self-development and self-realization. I'll repeat it. Self-control means the direction of the body and the faculties of the mind for self-development and self-realization. There are four goals of life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Self-development is dharma, artha, kama. Self-realization is moksha. Artha is achievement. Physical, intellectual, aesthetic, moral achievement. It's usually translated as wealth because those things enable us to get what we need in life. But it's achievement in the various aspects and the various dimensions of being human. And kama is legitimate pleasure. We get married, we have children. Support those children, raise those children with the goal that they become responsible, decent human beings, which is a great achievement. It requires a great deal of self-control, self-restraint, and inner development to do that, to send them forth into the world and make a contribution and continue the cycle of civilization, culture, and dharma. And in that process of self-control, self-restraint, and sublimation, the next phase opens up. We get self-expansion. We realize that we're not confined within our own little shells. Our expanded awareness gradually leads us to the understanding that virtue is a value in itself, that there's another dimension to human life. This comes upon us through our own experience, and then the teachings of the scriptures and the utterances of the holy people become meaningful to us because that dimension has opened to us. And we seek moksha, but still, we need self-control. We need the directions of the body and the faculties of the mind for that goal as well, when that becomes our main goal. Our fulfillment as human beings isn't in physical or intellectual development, or even aesthetic or moral development. Our true fulfillment is in spiritual development. When the spiritual reality is experienced, we know our unity, our identity with the Supreme Being. Then only is our deepest longing for complete freedom and blissfulness, our deepest longing for perfection, completely satisfied. Nothing less can satisfy. Subordinating this changing relative existence of the body and mind to the ultimate goal of God realization is self-denial. And this can be practiced in graduated steps. From the valley, we can reach the top of the mountain. This gradual training is self-discipline, self-denial, self-control. So to sum this up and kind of tie it all together, we're going to look at the chariot analogy in the Katha Upanishad. This is verse 3 of chapter 2, part 1, Katha Upanishad. Know the self, with a capital S, to be the master of the chariot. The chariot is the body, the buddhi. The determinative aspect of the mind is the driver, the charioteer. The mind is the rein. This self means the higher self, the Atman. You see, each and every person, each and every human being is a masked player. The word person in Latin means masked player. We play many roles. We start as sons and daughters and then become parents of sons and daughters, shouldering the responsibilities of life, students, employees, then perhaps employers, constantly playing different roles, masked player. That's the origin of the word person. And each time we play a role, we identify with it. I'm a man and a man only. I'm a woman and a woman only. I'm a husband and a husband only. Yet we are distinct from each of these roles. These masks that we put on in this world, these disguises under which we work in the world, delude others, and these masks keep us in delusion as well. We need to know our distinction from all those roles and masks. That's why this verse says, know this self, the Atman, to be the master of this chariot. The body-mind complex is a vehicle and not just a prison house. That is why the Upanishad refers to the body as a chariot. And this time we'd probably say automobile. Now, unfortunately, they're trying very hard to take the drivers out of the automobiles, and we do need the charioteer. Know the Atman to be the master of the chariot. The body is the chariot. The buddhi, the cognitive mind, is the charioteer. The Atman is the master of the chariot, and the master can afford to have a chauffeur. The driver of the chariot is the cognitive mind. And the mind, and by mind here, it means specifically the willing and feeling aspect of the mind. The mind is the reins. And what do the reins hold? The reins hold the horses, and the horses are the senses. The senses are reined in by the volitional and emotional aspects of mind under the control of the cognitive mind, the buddhi, which holds them tightly. The buddhi is the most closely is the part of the mind most closely aligned with Atman. The buddhi is lighted by Atman and endowed with clear understanding. The buddhi, the cognitive mind, has the power to understand and decide, as opposed to the deliberative aspect of mind that weighs the pros and cons. We can go on weighing the pros and cons indefinitely, forever. It is the determinative aspect, the buddhi, that decides. It's the aha moment. Yes, that's it. And clear determination has the ability to bring will and emotion into line, to implement the decision and guide this vehicle of the body and mind along the road of life. Now, the buddhi makes a jump. It's an intuitive jump. And that's why purity is important, because that purity makes the buddhi function better. It makes that intuition closer to the truth. Clear determination, the buddhi, is the driver of this chariot, the chauffeur. And above the chauffeur is the Atman, the conscious principle, the real master. So I'll read these verses consecutively. Know the Atman to be the master of the chariot, the body the chariot, the buddhi the charioteer, and the mind the reins. The senses, they say, are the horses. The sensible universe is the road traversed by the chariot of the body. If the buddhi, being related to a mind that is distracted, loses its discernment, its clarity, then the senses become uncontrolled, like the unruly horses of a charioteer. If the buddhi, being related to a distracted mind, loses its discrimination and therefore remains impure, then the embodied soul does not attain the goal, but enters into the round of birth and death. But if the buddhi, being related to the mind that is restrained, possesses discrimination and therefore always pure, then the embodied soul attains the goal from which one is not born again. A person who has buddhi for his charioteer and holds the reins of the mind firmly reaches the end of the road, and that is the supreme beatitude of God realization. Self-denial is enjoined by all religions. The practice of self-denial is necessary at every stage in human development: physical, intellectual, aesthetic, moral, and especially for our spiritual development. In order to say yes to what we are seeking, we have to say no to many things that impede or are unrelated to what we seek. Self-development, self-manifestation, and self-denial go hand in hand in every aspect of life, and especially in the pursuit of spiritual development and God realization. Om. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Swamiji. Now we're ready to open up for questions. If anyone would like to ask something, you can unmute and just go ahead.
May I start?
Renandi, yes.
This is
There's Rena's smile again.
Pranam Swamiji. And if you can give some pointers as to when your body is ailing, how do we keep our mind, how do I keep myself from not thinking of my body and mind?
Ah, yes. Well, you go over to the Vedanta Society of Greater Washington and you talk to Swami Atmajnanananda. Or Swami Brahmarupananda, or Swami Chittbrahmananda.
Maharaj, I email them all the time.
Yeah, yeah. You just make yourself a pest, you see. That's fine. Or you talk to one of the other devotees, or you put on bhajans, or you say your mantra, or you do something for someone else who's hurting. You see, that's really a wonderful thing about service. We do what we can for other people, and that makes us forget ourselves. That makes us forget ourselves. And we have wonderful examples of us before our eyes in the Ramakrishna Vivekananda movement. I remember my last visit to Swami Sarvagatananda in Boston. He was on hospice. And how many of you have met Swami Sarvagatananda? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Okay. So quite a few of you know what I'm talking about. So I would go and just sit with it. He was in bed, and there was a hospice lady that would come in and help him clean himself, and then he'd get up and he'd sit most of the day in a chair, and I'd put his glasses on, and he'd look at a picture of Holy Mother. The picture of her seated on, one of the pictures of her seated on her porch in Jaurambati. And there were other pictures there as well, but they were smaller, of Ramakrishna and I forgot who else. But her picture was bigger, and he was looking at her, and you really didn't want to get in the way of his gaze. He put his glasses on so he could look at Holy Mother. And there was a team of nurses, mostly immigrants from Africa, that came in on 8-hour shifts to take care of him, and they were paid. Very nice people. And one of them had the day shift, one of the days that I was there. His name was Robert. And he could see that, Swami was talking with me intermittently. And he asked me, he said, listen, I need to take a break. I'll be in the library. Can you just be here? And if you leave, let me know. I'll come back in. I said, fine. So after a while, Swami Sarvagatanandaji let me know it was time for me to leave. So I went into the library and to tell Robert that I was, that he needed to go back in. But when I was talking with him, I said, Robert, have you noticed anything special about this man? And he says, yes. He says, I have. I said, well, what is it? He says, it's a little hard to put into words, but it's very noticeable. Whenever I come, whenever I'm around him, no matter what my state of mind is, when I come, I always feel better when I'm with him. And I don't have to do anything to feel better, and it always happens. And I've noticed that if I come with a very upset or distracted or emotional mind, if my mind is exceptionally uncalm, when I come, I don't get as much benefit from being near Swami Sarvagatananda. So I make a conscious effort to be in as calm a frame of mind as I can when I come to serve him. Keep in mind, this is not a devotee. And when they change shifts, I saw them change shifts a couple of times. They'll confer, this is what's going on today, and then the next person goes on. So I asked him, has anyone else that's taking care of any of the other nurses that are taking care of Swami noticed this? And Robert said, we've all noticed it. One of the nurses that was taking care of him was also a minister. And he had started reading the literature. He'd gotten interested just because of this phenomenon being around Swami. So when I went to say goodbye, the hospice lady was just finishing up. She'd gotten him in his chair. He had his glasses on. He was looking at Holy Mother's picture. And she was this kind of very, you could see, sattvic lady. I mean, she always had a smile on her face. And she was straightening out his bed. And what did I say to her? I said something, and I said, take good care of him. And she says, I always do. She kind of sang it out. And then Swami asked me what we had communicated. And what did I tell him? I said, I asked her to take good care of you. And he said, I take care of them too. So it wasn't an accident that they felt better in his presence. He wasn't just going to take service, this custodial service from them without giving something. And my interpretation is that he consciously worked for them. He consciously prayed for their welfare. And they were feeling the benefits of it. So this is the fruit of spiritual life. Our existence becomes a blessing to others. And in that process of serving the people that were serving him, Swami Sarvagatananda continued to help people till his last breath. So this is very important. We help each other. The process of helping each other expands us. And we need to be like that lady that was tidying up Swami's bed after she'd given him a sponge bath. And ask her if she's helping him. I always do. I always do, with that lilt in her voice. And another thing occurs to me. Our Kansas City Center has been having, it's a official branch now, but they started having meetings, regular Vedanta meetings in 1947. And some of those original core people were just really jewels. Eugene and Carol Condon, I'm thinking of. And Carol passed away first, and Eugene called when she'd passed away. I happened to pick the phone up, and he told me what happened and what the circumstances were. And I said, well, Eugene, this is where a lifetime's practice of Vedanta pays off. And he says, it sure does. He was a big, strong guy, and that was all, everything was there in his voice when he said that over the phone. It still hurts, we can still get sad, but once we're on this path, we don't despair. Yeah.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You said it so nicely. Thank you, Maharaj.
Who's thanking me? Oh, the other Rena. Mashima. Yes, yes, yes. Listen, you owe me a meal. I don't get fed this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
you should come. I told Shami, hey, you should come
Yeah,
anytime.
yeah. Well, I'll enjoy your virtual meal this time.
Pranam Maharaj,
Namaste.
how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Good
Where's
to see
Suhita? You're on.
Suita? Oh, she already left. She was here.
Okay.
She just left.
Swamiji,
Hmm.
Swamiji, you just answered my question.
Oh, really? Really?
I'll see you in Tennessee.
Yeah, you're in New York.
This is Swapna.
Yeah, Swapna. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know your smile. Okay. So did you just want to say hello? No, or did you have a question?
Yes, Swamiji,
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
my answer too. I
Hmm.
wanted to tell you that I'm suffering from cancer, you know that, and nowadays the pain is so much. But with all this pain and suffering, God is making me work in the library 8 hours. And I'm getting outstanding performance award 4 years in a row. I don't understand that. I definitely don't understand that. Only thing I know, only mother is working. I'm not. I feel that way. I'm not in a spiritual way. I'm just a human being, ordinary human being. But I do feel mother is the only one who is working, and it is around, I feel that it is around the corner, but still I'm not depressed. I told my doctor, I'm not going to be disabled until it must. I don't think I'll be disabled. Sir, doctor, don't tell me that. I will keep working. And my colleagues will say, yesterday we had an email from her. She's not there today. That's going to be the spirit. With all my sufferings, Ma is making me work. I only understand Swami Kitty Master's song. He used to sing. All others also used to sing. Shakali tumari icha moi tara tumi tomar karma tumi kurma loke bole koriyami. So I just say I'm working, but in heart of hearts, I know for sure I'm not working. I'm almost gone, but I'm there in the body. I'm working. I don't know how I am working. I'm almost disabled, but still I'm doing my chores myself. I hope so. That's all I want, God. And I keep smiling, Swamiji. I keep smiling. I don't know how.
You make us smile too.
I don't know, because all the grace of the Trinity and all the grace of the devotees, all the great, I'm the dasas of dasa. Devotees, and then third step devotees. I could be maybe fifth step devotee. I don't mind, so long I am a devotee. Right, Swamiji? Thanks,
Yeah.
Swamiji. Thank you very much.
You're serving, mother's serving through you. And we are the recipients of that grace of the Divine Mother.
She's making me do that.
Yeah, if you look at our book, it says cataloging and publication, and it has all the details.
Yes.
You look at HarperCollins and Random House, and that's on the title, that's on the copyright page. You look at HarperCollins and Random House, way in the book, back of the book, it'll say cataloging and publication applied for.
Library. And if you go to the full record in the Library of Congress cataloging, in the 955 field, it says CM05. That is me.
Acha.
Okay. Namaste, Swamiji. I'll try to send some money to our ashram. Our ashram, I'm not sending too much nowadays, but I will try to send some money. Okay.
You sent good cheer.
Yes.
And bhakti.
Yes, Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji. Her question was my question, but you answered so well, especially the Swamiji's in the hospice. I don't think I'll go to hospice. That is for sure. Because I told my colleagues, you will see my email today, you don't see my email tomorrow. That's all it is going to be. I had a few more colleagues in Library of Congress went that way. I have confidence that I'm going to sleep and won't get up. That's all. It's okay. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to be, as you said, looking for salvation because I'm just an ordinary householder. Maybe another birth, maybe another birth. I don't know how many births, but still God's grace should be there.
Yes.
ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಆಗಲಿ ಗೋವಿಂದನ ದಯವಿರಲಿ, ಬಂದದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ಬರಲಿ ಗೋವಿಂದನ ದಯವಿರಲಿ. In my language, it means let it come, whatever comes, let it fall on us. Let this pandemic, anything fall on us, but let his daya will be on us. That's all we ask for. So let it come. I'm accepting all my illness, all my suffering without complaining. Without complaining. I never complain to God. I said, it is my Bharabda. What else he can do? It's okay. I will take it and I will have it, and I will take it and I will have it. Don't worry. So even I tell the doctor, I have come with a return ticket. I didn't come in one-way ticket. Don't worry, doctor. When the time comes, I just say goodbye. Don't worry, I say. He smiles at me. Oncologist is surprised. And
yeah, so you're serving him, you're cheering him up.
Yes.
He has to deal all the time with these sick people who are also depressed.
Yeah.
But you go in and you cheer him up. He looks
and
forward
I take lunch to him. Whenever he sees, I take lunch to him.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Anyone else?
So nice to see you, Maharaj.
Nice to see
and
you.
listen to
Shweta.
you. And come here sometime when it's open now.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
So good to see you. 2 days in a row with St. Louis Vedanta Center. Yesterday with Nirakaranandaji's bhajans.
Yeah, he was.
Nishpapanandaji's.
He was busy with the retreat, the Chicago retreat.
Yes, Maharaj, I attended that.
Yeah. We're doing 2 Zoom meetings right now. The Swami Chaitananda.
Chaitanandaji is
he's also doing
join it pretty shortly. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any more questions? We know everyone's so happy to have Swamiji's company. It's nice to just chat with him. But does anyone actually have a question before we close? Okay, then let me.
Listen, I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I quoted that little terse aphorism of Shankara: self-control is the direction of the faculties of body and mind to self-development and self-realization. But if anyone knows the source of it, please let me know, because I haven't been able to trace it out. There.
Okay, good question.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, then, Swamiji, we thank you so much. We wish it had been in person, but this is the next best thing. And we all send our pranam to you and our love and our gratitude, and hope we can do this again sometime.
Yes, in person,
Okay.
preferably.
In person.
Yes.
Okay. So, and to all of our devotees, thank you so much, everyone, for joining and your questions and participation. And we hope to see you all again soon.
All right.
Okay. Then I think I will close.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you, Maharaj.
Be well.
Pranam.
Very nice lecture, Maharaj.
You are watching,